A struggling mom thought her blind date was ruined the moment she walked in with her son, but instead, it became the night that changed her life forever. The cafe's entrance bell chimed softly as Emma pushed the glass door open, her hand tightly holding onto her son's small fingers. The warmth of the place greeted her with golden light, mingled aromas of roasted coffee and fresh bread filling the air, yet her chest felt unbearably heavy. She wasn't supposed to be here like this, not with Max clinging to her side, not with her heart full of apology before the evening even began. A blind date was already nerve-wracking, but showing up as a single mother with her child in tow felt like walking into a battlefield unarmed. Max, only 6 years old, shuffled beside her with innocent curiosity, his toy car peeking out from his coat pocket. He gazed around at the strangers sitting in pairs, laughing, sipping, whispering. He noticed the clinking glasses and the faint music humming in the background. Emma whispered, "Stay close, sweetheart. Just for tonight, try to be extra good, okay?" He nodded solemnly, but his little hand squeezed hers tighter, sensing her unease. Her eyes quickly scanned the cafe until she spotted him. Daniel Hayes. He was exactly as her friend had described. Tall, confident, the kind of man who drew attention without even trying. His suit looked sharp under the cafe's soft lighting, and his presence carried an ease that seemed untouchable, as though the world bent slightly around him. He glanced at his watch, then lifted his head, his gaze meeting hers. Emma's stomach twisted. This was it. She took a breath, guided Max forward, and tried to summon a smile. But as they approached, the shame spilled out before she could stop it. I'm so sorry, she blurted, her voice low and nervous. This wasn't supposed to happen. The babysitter canceled on me at the very last minute, and I couldn't find anyone else. I didn't want to stand you up, but I understand if you'd rather reschedule. Max pressed his face into her coat, shy under the stranger's eyes. Emma stroked his hair, praying that the man in front of her would understand, or at least not judge too harshly. She had faced enough raised eyebrows, enough whispers from people who thought bringing a child into her already complicated world was a mistake. For a moment, Daniel just studied her, his expression unreadable. Emma braced herself for the polite dismissal, the awkward excuse that would send her and Max walking back out the door into the cold evening. But then, something softened in his eyes. His lips curved into a gentle, almost amused smile. "Relax," he said calmly, his voice carrying warmth she hadn't expected. His gaze dropped to Max, who peeked up at him with wide eyes, and then returned to Emma. "He's welcome to join us. After all, if I'm getting to know you, I should meet the most important person in your life, shouldn't I?" The words stopped her in her tracks. Her throat tightened, and for a second, she forgot how to breathe. No man had ever said something like that to her. Most had seen her son as a complication, a burden, a reason to walk away before even trying. But here was Daniel Hayes, wealthy, successful, completely out of her league, treating her child not as an inconvenience, but as a part of the package he was willing to accept. Emma sank into the chair across from him, guiding Max onto the seat beside her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she smoothed out the napkin in front of her, still searching for words. You're very kind," she managed to say. Her cheeks flushed, but her heart fluttered in a way it hadn't in years. Daniel shrugged lightly, his eyes twinkling with an easy confidence. "It's nothing kind, really. It's just honest. You walked in here worried I'd only want part of your story. But you and your son, you're a package deal. That's not something to apologize for." Max, emboldened by Daniel's tone, carefully pulled his toy car from his pocket and placed it on the table. He looked up at his mother and whispered, "Mommy, can he see my car?" Emma hesitated, embarrassed, but Daniel leaned forward with genuine interest. "Of course I want to see it. What's his name?" he asked. Emma blinked, realizing he had just asked her son the same way another adult might ask about a friend or pet. Max's eyes lit up, and for the first time that night, Emma felt something inside her shift, from dread to hope, from fear to the fragile possibility that maybe, just maybe, this evening wouldn't be a disaster. And as she watched Daniel smile at her son's simple joy, Emma thought quietly to herself, perhaps this blind date wasn't blind at all. Perhaps fate had known exactly what it was doing. Dinner unfolded in ways Emma had never dared to imagine. She had braced herself for awkward silence, for Daniel to politely endure the presence of her son until the evening could end. But instead, laughter slowly bubbled into the air like a melody neither of them expected. Max, usually quiet around strangers, seemed drawn to Daniel in a way that both startled and moved Emma. It started with a small question. Daniel, studying the menu, leaned toward Max and asked, "So what do you like to eat? Burgers, pizza? Or are you a mac and cheese kind of guy?" Max's eyes widened with surprise, as if no adult had ever really asked him his opinion in a serious way. "I like spaghetti," he said shyly. "Spaghetti?" Daniel grinned, shutting the menu. "Then spaghetti it is. You've got good taste." Emma watched, stunned, as her son straightened proudly in his chair. She had spent so many dinners apologizing for his picky eating, for the crayons he scribbled on napkins, for the messes he sometimes made. But Daniel made Max feel as though his preferences mattered, as though his presence wasn't an interruption, but part of the evening. While waiting for their meals, Daniel reached for a napkin and began folding it with careful precision. Max tilted his head curiously, inching closer across the table. "What are you doing?" "You'll see," Daniel said mysteriously, his fingers folding the paper again and again until, at last, he held up a little paper airplane. "There, test flight ready." Max's face lit up, his earlier shyness forgotten. Daniel leaned back, launched the napkin plane, and it glided a short distance before landing softly near Emma's glass. A laugh escaped her lips, unexpected and uncontrollable, and it startled her how long it had been since she had laughed so freely. Soon, Max was attempting his own version, crumpling napkins with determination, while Daniel offered tips like a coach guiding a star player. Other diners turned their heads, some smiling at the unlikely trio in the corner, a powerful CEO, a struggling mother, and a little boy building airplanes out of paper napkins as though the world outside did not exist. Emma's chest swelled with emotions she struggled to name. She had come here expecting judgment, perhaps even rejection. Instead, she was watching her son giggle with a man who seemed completely at ease, a man who didn't flinch at the chaos a child could bring. Their meals arrived, steaming plates placed before them. Daniel twirled a forkful of spaghetti and winked at Max. "You know, I haven't ordered this in years." "You've reminded me how good it is." Max beamed, as though he had accomplished something grand. Emma's heart ached at the sight. For so long, her boy had lived with only her. No father figure, no man to share his dreams with. And yet here he was, leaning across the table, telling Daniel about airplanes and how one day he wanted to fly a real big jet. Daniel listened intently, nodding at every detail, even asking follow-up questions that made Max feel like an expert. "So you'll need a lot of training for that. Do you think you're ready for all that responsibility?" Max nodded fiercely. "I'll practice. I'll be the best." Emma blinked back tears, excusing herself for a moment under the pretense of washing her hands. In the quiet of the restroom, she pressed her palms against the counter, trying to steady herself. Why was this man so different? Why did his kindness feel like sunlight on skin that had only known shadows? She wasn't used to being admired for her role as a mother. Most men she had met acted like her son was baggage she dragged along. When she returned, Daniel's eyes caught hers instantly, as though he had been waiting. His voice softened, carrying more weight than casual conversation. "You don't have to apologize for him," he said, seeing the way she adjusted Max's napkin and checked his shirt for stains. "I see the way you're fighting for him, doing everything on your own. That's not something to hide. That's something to admire." Emma froze, her heart pounding at the sincerity in his tone. She lowered herself into her seat slowly, afraid to break the fragile moment. His words didn't feel rehearsed. They didn't feel like pity. They felt like truth. For years she had carried shame. Shame for being abandoned. Shame for not offering her son the life he deserved. Shame for walking into places like this with her head lowered as though she owed the world an apology. But tonight, in Daniel's presence, that shame was melting into something she hadn't dared to hold on to in so long. Dignity. Max tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, can he be my friend too?" Her throat tightened and tears threatened to spill, but she managed to smile at her son. Across the table, Daniel's gaze held hers, steady and kind, as if to silently answer the question on Max's behalf. And in that moment, Emma realized this dinner was more than a blind date. It was the beginning of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. The evening had passed more quickly than Emma expected. What began as an anxious, uncertain dinner had unfolded into something almost magical. The plates were empty now, only crumbs of bread and faint traces of spaghetti sauce left on the dishes. The cafe had grown quieter as the night stretched on, and soft jazz music played in the background. Max, his little body tired from laughter and chatter, leaned sleepily against his mother's arm, his toy car resting in his lap. Emma's heart twisted as she reached for her purse. She had already rehearsed the words in her head, how she would thank Daniel politely, insist on paying her share, and quietly end the evening before it turned into something she couldn't afford emotionally. She knew how men like him lived, busy, successful, surrounded by choices. A struggling single mom with a little boy couldn't possibly fit into that world. "Please," she said, fumbling with the zipper of her purse, her voice almost trembling. "At least let me cover my part of the meal. You've already been far too generous." Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Emma, don't worry about it. Dinner's on me." She swallowed hard, heat rising in her cheeks. "I don't want you to feel like I came here expecting that. I don't like owing people things." His eyes softened, and he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. "You don't owe me anything. Tonight wasn't about money. It was about this." He gestured lightly toward Max, who was now yawning, then toward her. "And honestly, it's been worth more than any deal I've ever signed." Emma's chest tightened. She had expected indifference or at best polite tolerance. But here he was, speaking as though time with her and her son was a gift, not an inconvenience. Daniel stood and reached for her coat, helping her slip it on with a gentlemanly ease that felt almost foreign to her. She whispered a soft thank you, her voice catching in her throat. As they prepared to leave, Daniel crouched down to Max's level. The little boy blinked at him sleepily, clutching his car. "Hey, champ," Daniel said gently, his smile warm and genuine. "You take good care of your mom, all right?" "She's the strongest woman I've met." Max nodded solemnly, as though he had just been given a very important mission. Emma felt her throat close up again, fighting back tears. No man had ever looked at her like this, or spoken to her son with such respect. The three of them stepped out into the night. The air was crisp, cool enough that Emma instinctively pulled Max's jacket tighter around him. The street lamps cast long shadows on the pavement, and the distant hum of the city surrounded them. For a moment, the world felt strangely still. She turned to face Daniel, meaning to thank him one last time before they parted ways. She wanted to tell him how much it had meant, how his kindness had touched places in her heart she thought had gone numb. But before she could speak, he beat her to it. "How about," he said casually, though his eyes carried a spark of something more, "we don't let this be the last time? Next dinner I'll bring proper paper for airplanes. I have a feeling Max is going to beat me once he gets more practice." Emma's lips parted, caught off guard. She had expected goodbye, not a promise of more. "Daniel, she began, but the words tangled in her throat. She didn't want to hope for too much. Hope, she had learned, was dangerous. He stepped a little closer, not in a way that overwhelmed, but in a way that steadied her. "You don't have to answer now," he said softly. "Just know, I'd like to see you again, both of you." For a heartbeat, Emma couldn't breathe. She glanced down at her son, who was half asleep in her arms, and then back at the man before her. A man who hadn't recoiled at her reality, but instead embraced it as part of the picture. Her lips curved slowly into a smile, small but sincere. "I think we'd like that too." Daniel's smile deepened, and something unspoken passed between them, a promise, a beginning, a fragile yet powerful spark of a future neither of them had expected when the evening began. As he walked them to her car, Emma realized that this blind date hadn't been blind at all. It had been a glimpse of possibility, of healing, of love that didn't ask her to apologize for who she was or for the child who was her world. And for the first time in years, Emma felt her heart whisper a truth she had long buried. Maybe, just maybe, they were no longer alone. What she thought was a ruined blind date turned out to be the night her world changed, because sometimes love doesn't come despite the struggles. It comes because of them.